Hello friends, warm welcome to today's session, and today we will be talking about IAM components, that is Identity and Access Management components. So let's take a deep dive. So under IAM components we have users, groups, policies and roles. Let's try to understand what each of these components are. So talking about users is nothing but end users such as people or employees who will use AWS resources using AWS console or programmatic access. So once you have your AWS account, and of course there would be developers, users and administrators who would be logging into this AWS account to create resources or maybe to use those resources, and there needs to be a way to provision them and access. So first thing is you will be creating those users, and that is done using this using users component of IAM. So you can actually create those users using mail ID or have some usernames based on whatever your requirement is. And there are two ways user can access this, you can say resources, AWS resources. One is through console, that is UI, user interface console, or the other thing is programmatic access. Let's say you want to run or create resources using a script, so that needs a programmatic access, and that can also be provisioned. So that is what about we had in users. Groups, a collection of users in the group will inherit the permission of the group, example developers group or admin group. So let's assume I have a list of 10 users, and out of these 10 users, 5 users belong to developers group and 5 users belong to admin group. So of course, there is no point in creating each of those users and giving them the same permissions to each of those 5 users. Like there is a group of 5 users who are developers. So I'll be giving, uh, you know, each of those developers a same kind of permission. There's no point in this. Instead of that, what we can do is create 10 users, create one group which is kind of developer group. Now add all the developers in this group. So we had 5 developers in the group. So let's all add all those 5 users in this one group, which we would call as developers group. And whatever permission then you give to this group, to developers group, that would be inherited by all those users. Simple. That's all we had in this groups. Third component is policies. So policy is a JSON document that defines their permission to the user, group or role. Permissions in the policies determine whether the request is allowed or denied. Most policies are stored in AWS as JSON documents. So policy is a JSON document, which is Java script object notation. So it's a simple kind of document which tells about what kind of access you are giving and what kind of uh, resources would be used. So that's a JSON document. Then permission in the policies determine whether the request is allowed or denied. So you can allow or deny a permission to certain resources using these policies. If you say allow, then whatever permission sets you write in the policies, those would be allowed. If you say deny, then the defined set of permission would be actually denied to the user in that policy. Most policies are stored in AWS as JSON documents. So all the policies that are already stored, there are some, not some, in fact, many policies which are created by default by AWS so that, you can use existing resources, and those are into JSON documents, JSON format, you can say. Roles. You can create roles and assign them to AWS resources. You attach a policy document to these roles. Let's study that with an example. Creating a role for EC2 to copy, that is read and write contents to S3. So even yesterday we spoke about, if there are many resources and those resources can talk to each other. So let's say an instance, that is EC2, Elastic Cloud Compute, wants to download some logs from S3. So S3 is nothing but a storage where, think of it as a folder where you can store all your logs or whatever information you have. Now, in an example where we want to, the EC2 instance wants to fetch logs or files from S3, EC2 needs to have some permission on S3, right? So what you can do is we will create a role with the name, with a random name, let's say EC2 to S3 communication. Now, in this role, we will attach a policy document. So role has nothing of its own. It makes no meaning when you just create role without a policy document. You will have to attach a policy document to role. So this policy document will define what permissions are you giving. So considering that the requirement is EC2 to fetch log from S3, so we'll write a policy document which will give a read permission or download permission for logs over S3. So we will allow listing or copying logs from S3 in that policy document. We will attach this policy document to that role. And now we will assign this role to EC2 instance. So the next time when EC2 goes to S3 asking for logs, EC2 will have this role, and that is why S3 will share those logs. So this is what the role is. I hope all these components now make better sense to you since we have discussed it. So this is what we had in today's session. Hope you liked it. I'll wait to see or read your comments on your reviews of how did you find this session. So I'll see you in the next section. Goodbye.